So hey guys, what's up? I'm Siddhan and your host for today's webinar on human cloud and how remote work and the gig economy is transforming work. The guest for today's webinar is Matthew Mottola. Hey Matthew, welcome to the webinar. How does it feel to be here?
Good, good. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you all and can't wait. Can't wait.
So guys, something about Matthew. So Matthew is currently the co-founder and CEO of VentureL, the leading platform for freelancers to run their businesses and author of upcoming book, The Human Cloud. Matthew has led and transformed today's leading companies at Microsoft in joint partnership with Upwork. He built Microsoft 365 Freelance Toolkit, the unlock for enterprises to embrace the human cloud at scale, bringing Microsoft from nascent to an industry leader in under 2 years. At Gigstore, he built Addition, a service that used freelancers, developers, data scientists, and product managers to consistently generate the what should be built in the software development lifecycle. At Georgia Tech, he helped to develop the entrepreneurship curriculum and guest lectures. And guys, this event is brought to you by Designhill, world's largest creative marketplace, catering to the needs of businesses and startups of all sizes. And with the help of designer community, which is 118,000 strong. So Matthew, before we start, we would like to know on a very fundamental level, what is human cloud?
Yeah, awesome question. So to be super basic, the human cloud is the ability to meet you all right now, sitting where we all are in the world. That's really it. A lot of people like to put technical terms, but to be honest, it's just the ability to have Wi-Fi and IP address and be able to work, communicate, build relationships wherever you are in the world.
And especially in this COVID times, people are actually adapting to the freelance economy and gig economy on a very aggressive level. So, in terms of your experience, how has been the learning curves for different domains? Which domain is most accepting to human cloud, and which domain is still struggling to accept the concept?
Yeah, it's an incredible question, and I wish I could say this industry, this region, this job, and I wish it was that simple. In reality, everyone is having to embrace it in different ways. If you think about the talent themselves, a lot of people are realizing that full-time employment isn't as safe as we thought it was. And so there's a lot of people waking up and saying, whoa, that crazy thing that we called freelancing, independent work, you name it, there's actually some stability there. And so that's one end of the token, is realizing, holy crap, this thing is pretty real and actually might be more stable. In terms of who, because we like to think, technology is really value neutral. In terms of, technology is not going to be the great savior of the world. It's going to amplify generally what already exists. And so if you are strong in full-time employment, most likely you're going to be good in independent work. Now, the key difference, though, for all of you is that you're now bound to outcomes. What I mean by that is, in full-time employment, usually it lasts 6 months and it's pretty hard to fire you. And you do a lot of things that aren't exactly the work. So if you're a designer, there's more about politics. Whereas if you're a freelancer or independent, it's all about the designs you create and the way that your clients accept your work. And so that's I'd say the biggest difference from a big shock, is that there is some different mechanisms in terms of what makes a freelancer successful and a full-time employee. And we'll get into it in the presentation, but that's been the biggest one that I've noticed for sure.
Yeah, I will second you that, because right now we are depending on a lot of freelancers as well, and given the flexibility that we have in hiring freelancers and everyone, it's that we have a lot of value on the table. There's a very diverse set of things which they can bring on the table right now, and we are very much not limited to the people which we have people we have in office right now. So yeah, that is something about. And I guess Matthew, we are good to go for presentation as well. So please go ahead. We are looking forward to it.
Yeah, and first off, to everyone out there, I want this to be as collaborative as possible. So ask as many questions as possible and grill me, challenge me. Definitely don't believe what I say. But yeah, let's make it as collaborative as we can. All right. Perfect. All right, so the theme of the talk is going to be decoding, let me next this up, is going to be decoding the human cloud. Like we talked about, we can make this super complicated if we want to, throw a bunch of technical words, but in reality, when you think human cloud, just think the ability to listen to me while you are wherever you are in the world. I'm here in Singapore. I actually grew up outside of Boston, then San Francisco, then Seattle. And it sounds cheesy, but I really believe we live in a world that's borderless in terms of it doesn't matter where you are. To give you a brief, thank you for giving a huge background on me. That was way more impressive than I'll say about myself. So me personally, I started freelancing, and to me, it was what was normal. And so whenever anyone asks me, and you'll see in the presentation, whenever anyone asks me sort of what's been your journey, I owe everything to freelance. So let's start. And I don't know if you've all noticed this, but in every single executive presentation, they usually put up a picture of their family. And I'll admit, I don't have kids, so I can't put photos of kids, but I'll throw 3 pictures of family that you all can laugh at. Okay. Now, I want you all to think about how kind of weird it is that I showed you a bunch of pictures of my family. And now I want you to think of how weird it is that that's actually not my family. Those are my freelancers. And so when we think about, why I'm so passionate and why a bunch of freelancers are so passionate about this future of work in the human cloud, one of the big things that's given me is his ability to build these very, very deep relationships. So I want to shatter that first myth before we go any further, that it's something that, when we go out of the office, we lose the relationships, because that's just not true. I've built the deepest relationships possible, and it's the number one reason that I'm so passionate about this. The second thing, and why I'm going to show you an even more outrageous GIF here of a bridge, is because freelancing was my personal bridge to opportunity. I grew up in an area that was very, very, it was in the US, and it was very sort of traditional in terms of you're supposed to do exactly this. You go to college, you major in this, you start working at the Big Four, you stay in your lane, and you hope that in 20, 30 years you get your pension. And freelancing didn't care about where I went to school, what I majored in. All it cared about was, could I provide value? And so that was the first thing it did for me, was it opened me up to a new world of opportunity that was beyond a traditional path. The second thing it did was it opened me up to people and actual experiences that really accelerated my career. One of the reasons that I think freelancing is an incredible thing for everyone is it accelerates the feedback loop. You could call it of opportunity or from project to project. So if you're in full time, you might work somewhere for 2 years, whereas in freelance, you can probably do the same thing in 2 months. So you have this crazy accelerated feedback loop. So not only does it open you up to opportunity globally in ways that aren't the traditional path, it also accelerates that feedback loop. So let's talk about this right away. I noticed that in the sort of pre-questions, this was a question, and let's hit this immediately. The impact of COVID has done 2 things for the freelance economy. It has increased demand and increased expectations. Now, when we say increased demand, that purely means more clients are looking to hire freelancers. I've seen a bunch of different types of numbers. It's usually there's been a 30 to 50% increase. But beyond the numbers, what clients and companies need is a way to rescale, to get back to where they were before this giant pandemic. And they have to do it in a different way, which is in line with what I'll show you of why even hire freelancers. So that's a little teaser in terms of it's really driven up the demand. With that said, it's also driven up expectations. What I mean by that is that the freelance economy at first was built to just connect one freelancer to one person doing the hiring. But now that there's been increased demand, that spend, so the actual budget that's getting used on these freelancers, is being compared to the experience of an agency, which if we say agency, think 1,000 to 100,000 person company that can say yes to every project, that has a bunch of different people when it's in terms of account management, the people doing the work. But so this has been the impact of COVID. At a high level, it's increased the demand, but it's also increased the expectations. So let's sort of go back and put ourselves in the client's shoes and really ask, why in the world do we want to engage in freelancers? Which will tell you what the freelancers are, but before we get to that, why are we even having this discussion? There's generally three main reasons or three buzzwords that in a leadership team, you're going to keep hearing, or in a boardroom, you're going to keep hearing. It's better, it's faster, it's more cost efficient. When we say better, it just makes sense. You have the whole globe to access talent. And so you can go beyond the 50 miles of your campus. So you have this hyper relevant quality, which one of my favorite examples was we were hiring a writer for a book, and we needed a story about Da Vinci. Now, prior and full-time, right, we would just go find a bunch of resumes of writers. But in this case, we found an extremely good writer who specialized in writing on Leonardo da Vinci. So there's this crazy hyper-relevant quality involved in making it better. Faster just means to get you hired or to find you is quicker than the existing alternatives, which are agencies or hiring full-time. And cost efficiency, I want to make sure we don't call this cheaper labor, because we can definitely have this discussion about freelance can be cheaper, but it's about the cost efficiency, meaning you're getting the right person in the right opportunity. So that's why companies hire freelancers. Now back to this question, right? And I know we gave you an inspirational story. We told you why, but what are we really talking about? It's remote, it's independent, and it's outcome-based. So I really want to hammer this last one, and you'll see when we go over the get started on why this is so important. But yes, it's fully remote. Yes, people are independent, working on multiple different clients at one time. But the driver is that it's outcome-based versus just sitting in a seat for 8 hours a day. In terms of where the human cloud lives, I know I told you that it's just us being able to talk to each other, but if you want to grill into the freelance economy, there's really three areas of entry. I'm sure you all have heard of Upwork. Think of Upwork, the reason it's in the middle is because it's the broadest. If you've never heard of this, if you just landed from Mars and you want to know what a freelancer is and what the freelance economy is, just go to Upwork and you'll see it immediately. Now, all the way to the left, when you see these people, what that represents is that you might not need a platform. Quite frankly, you might need an individual in person, and so long as you work on a contract basis, which could be a day, it could be a week, it could be months, multi-months, but you can go straight to that person. So this one, you can even think LinkedIn, right? The ability to go direct to the person. So that's all the way to the left. When we go to the right, when you see a bunch of logos, this is now niche talent marketplaces. So in the middle, when we see Upwork, think of Upwork as everything. It's every single skill that's out there. But when we look to the right, when we look at companies like Catalent, Paro, Parker Dewey, Gigster, Instant Teams, there's many of them. These ones say we are the best at a specific niche or skill. So Paro, finance and accounting. Parker Dewey, actually just students. Gigster, software development. Instant Teams, teams. So this is sort of the access points if you're interested, and this is both sides of being a client and a customer. In terms of what's possible, you can freelance everything. Now, one of the main shifts is that companies are relying more and more on freelancers. I'll give you an example. Historically, companies have always been contingent. Contingent just means they're not full-time employees. And generally, at least in the US, companies were between 30 and 60% contingent. Now, that is shifting over to freelance because instead of having something in the middle, you're able to go straight to the talent. And so all that means is that you have a bunch of really talented individuals that you can hire as individuals on a contract basis. And if you think about the skills, it's near endless in that way. So I want to highlight 3 potential projects or 3 potential outcomes, and purposefully you see it like a ladder. So all the way to the left, that's just finding an outcome. If you've always wondered about writing a newsletter, why not hire a freelance writer to write that newsletter? If we want to go a little more complicated, if you want a website, why not hire a freelancer or a team of freelancers to build that website? So that's the first sort of level, is just think about an outcome, a little project. The second level is think of more complex projects. Think of this as multi-month, potentially multi-years. And the example I'm going to give is in writing our book. We, quite frankly, for any product people out there, we did a pretty dumb thing. We told publishers that we had a full book and that we could deliver it in 7 months. And in reality, we had nothing. And so we had to figure out, how in the world are we going to get a 52,000 word book written in 7 months while my co-author and I were sitting in full-time jobs? And so, fortunately, we knew about freelancers. And so we ended up having around 15 freelancers going in and out of the book, everything from interviewing people to writing up the stories to editing, design. One of my favorite was we actually had a comedian come in. But so the only way we were able to get a full book project done was embracing freelancers throughout the process. Now, with that said, I want to stamp out one myth that you should outsource everything, because we didn't do that at all. We made sure that we sort of owned the code on the actual text. So all of the writing came from us, but everything else and everything to build the stage so that we could optimize our time for writing, we engaged freelancers for. So now we have specific projects. We have very complex projects. The last one is, what if you could create new products or business units using freelancers? Now, I'll give you one example. When I was at one of the fastest growing software development platforms, the largest motorcycle manufacturer, they used over 30 freelancers to do their whole digital experience. So we're talking mobile application, we're talking all the Bluetooth functionality. And so they embraced freelancers because they knew they couldn't get the right talent in-house, meaning where they were located. A second one, though, that's personal, very personal to me, is when I was at Microsoft, I had no headcount, but I had freelancers. And so I had freelancers helping me through everything. And a brief on that, on the product that I built, it was, think about it as an enterprise layer, ironically, so that every company on the planet can work with freelancers. And so it required ideation to learn from our customers and do a bunch of research. It required development to actually develop the software and develop everything going into the product, as well as a lot of marketing. And so freelancers were used throughout that process, and there's no way that my product would have gotten built, would have been built without freelancers. So those are 3 huge stories of what is possible. Now, how can you get started? I'm going to run you through, if you're a company, if you're a freelancer, and no matter who you are. So if you're a company, right now, step 1 is pick an outcome. And make sure at first, something that's low risk, that if it goes wrong, that's okay, because you're just trying to understand the process and what is possible. One of my favorite outcomes to get started is something like market research. So if you're leading a product, one of the best things you can do is go out and just research all your competitors. Go find all public channels. Get some sentiment analysis. See what people love about your competitors, what they hate about your competitors. So that's been a great project that I've always used with myself, with companies that I advise, and leadership teams, is just try some research or something that's very low risk. Now, step 2, trust the expert. one of the biggest gulp moments that you are going to have as a leader when working in the human cloud is that freelancers specifically, they're the expert. Most likely, if you are the one hiring, you are not the expert. Quick example, when I was helping out a university, and I had promised a textbook. Now, I had about 70% of the textbook done, the content was done, but I had no idea what was needed to design it to get it in ebook format. To be honest, I only had a month, and so I didn't even have time to teach myself what was required. But instead, I just put everything out there onto a freelance platform. And the freelance designer came to me and said, this is what you need, this is how long it'll take, and this is how much it should cost. And so I let them fully take over the scope, and it was, to date, the best project in terms of efficiency. So step 2 is let the expert take over. And one thing, if we have some templates for this, but if you need some frameworks, look up what's called a statement of work, when really all you want to make sure is that what is going to happen, what are some comparables, when is each thing going to get done, and how much does it cost? So that's step 2, trust the expert. Step 3, learn and repeat. You're gonna mess up. You're gonna learn throughout the process. So just keep learning and repeating. Now, if you're a freelancer, number 1, think about what I just said about the clients and understand the pain they're going through and make their life as simple as possible. So step 1 is pick an outcome that you can deliver. Look through what you've done. What are some of the tangible results that you have delivered? Also think about your skills. So that's step 1. Step 2, put yourselves in your client's shoes. This means more than just knowing what you can deliver. Think about everything that they have to think about. Try to understand where they are finding you. One exercise that I always do with freelancers is just go to Google and act like you're the client that's going to hire you. Figure out exactly what they need and just put yourself in their shoes. So step 3, under promise, over deliver. Especially for the first couple of projects, you just need the tangible proof point of this is what I did, this is what I can do for you, and here's the social proof. And so those first couple of projects, it's really, really, really about just knocking it out of the park and really having that social proof in terms of the person you help, giving you a recommendation or anything that, be as creative as possible. So step 4, similar to the last one, learn, quantify, and repeat. When I say quantify, one big difference is if you are independent talent, you are a business, and you do have to operate in many cases just like a business. And one of the first things you do, if you're marketing or product, you name it, is you figure out how to make a good case study. And a good case study always comes down to the tangible metrics that you can then turn around and tell a potential client, I can increase your revenue by X. I can decrease your cost by X. Whatever it is that your outcome is, quantify that. So last step, learn, quantify, repeat. Now, this one is for absolutely everyone. And I'll give you a little hint about the picture. When I first started freelancing, I didn't know it was called freelancing. I just knew that I didn't want to go work at the shoe shop or the grocery store. And so I went to a bunch of local businesses and I just asked how I could help. And they didn't come back and say, hey, can you sit in the seat for 8 hours? Can you be an intern? They instead told me a list of their problems, and I just picked out and said, I can do that one. Now, like I mentioned, they didn't say, come sit in this seat. And so the first place I went to was, where's the Wi-Fi? So I went to a coffee shop, and I fell in love with the ability to work from a coffee shop. Fast forward, and I had to learn that this actually wasn't real, meaning I had to go to an office. But in remote work and in the human cloud, that same thing that I had in terms of no one's going to give me a seat to sit in. I have to work remotely or at my house or whatever it is. The same thing applies for this new environment. So I call it the coffee shop challenge. Step 1, just go to a coffee shop. Step 2, stay there for at least 2 hours. Now, are you busy? Meaning, are you doing work? Is there work for you to do? If yes, that's awesome. You are in a good position and increase the scope of work that you can do remote. If no, simply ask yourself, why not? So that's it. We covered the why, we covered the what, we covered the how. I think the most important thing that I can tell you all before we break into questions is that this really is what we call a radical redistribution of opportunity. When you think about it, like I said, I'm sitting in Singapore. Wherever you are in the world, we have the ability to connect. We have the ability to build a relationship. And you and I have the ability to show value and have that value be quantified and lead to subsequent opportunities in ways that no one could have imagined even 10 years ago. So that's it. The human cloud is simple, but it's a massive, massive radical redistribution of opportunity. And I can't wait to hear your questions. Let's jump into these now.
Of course, Matthew. And I actually was into that last point of yours in quantifying things from a freelancer. Let us say we have businesses which actually are driven by numbers. Let us say a CRO business or something on a financial level. But let's say it's a creative business where I'm involved in creating a number of designs, or let's say I'm writing a script, a film script. How to quantify something which is that intuitive?
That's a great question. So let me summarize. It's how do I quantify if it's something that's a little more subjective in terms of the script?
Exactly.
I think it really comes down to what are I'm putting in the terms outcomes, but it's really what are the results, or there's a term if you all want to get really geeky called job to be done. But really what it says is we're all looking for something to hire. So for example, I'm hungry, so I'm going to hire this apple, or I'm twitchy, so I'm going to hire a fidget spinner or something like that. And so it really, you got to get to the core of what is that script doing? Is it enabling a demo to have X more views or X percentage of conversion, or even just getting the social proof as well? So I'd say that's where, if you can't quantify that upfront result, and it's actually an and, like you should do both of them, it's really important to have that subjective review, and even just the relationship, right? I think the best part about sort of this networked work in terms of working as an independent or freelancer is you build super deep relationships, and some of those relationships might turn into a referral. Like there's more opportunity for this network to pay off, so long as you're adding insane amounts of value for the people you have the opportunity to work with.
And so when I talk about working from home or working as a freelancer, so technology comes as an enabler. So can you suggest some favorite tools of yours which you think freelancing companies can use? Of course, they can be one Microsoft 365. That can be one, but yeah, something on those lines.
I promise you, we won't shamelessly plug Venturel. No, but so I'd start by saying, try to live without the tool and instead understand the process behind the tool. So in a remote environment, it amplifies problems that can already exist if you're not properly running a project or whatever it is that you're doing. So I think every freelancer or even companies hiring freelancer, the first thing that comes to mind is what needs to happen and who's doing it. And so whether you're using Trello, Asana, Jira, whatever it is, there's going to be some component of task management that is critical. The second component is then the communication, which could be just talking back and forth, but also things like feedback. And so here, I mean, it's all over the place in terms of what companies want to use. We heavily use Slack for sort of our day-to-day communication. But when it comes to working feedback, we heavily leverage G Suite. And we're very, very, very sort of strict on ourselves about if it's working feedback, go straight to the source, meaning go as close to the document or file as you can. So first thing, task management. Second thing is the communication collaboration. And I'd say the third thing is file sharing in terms of, whether you're using a G Drive, Dropbox, you name it. If people have specific questions about, there's literally a tool for everything, but those are the two hiccups that I noticed is like, make sure you have task management locked down and make sure you have communication and collaboration.
So I guess that pretty much answers the questions, because we always get stuck on which tool to use all the time. Even though we have a clear vision of what we want to achieve, choosing a tool sometimes become a hassle for us. So yeah, it does actually. So let us say this after this COVID thing ends, and hopefully it ends soon. Do you think that again that the freelance economy and will be a new permanent now, or will it evolve really strong?
So the data is showing that COVID has accelerated the trend already underway. Freelance is not new, right? Whether COVID happened or not, in the next 7 years, over half the U.S. workforce would be freelancers, and companies, the company interest was accelerating by I think around like 30 to 40%, somewhere around that number. All COVID did was it said that crazy thing called remote work is actually more feasible than we thought. And now what it's doing is it's prioritizing sustainability and profitability in a way that now freelance is a ideal solution based off the cost efficiency that we showed you in the presentation. And so it's not sort of a panacea in terms of like magic, and now just because of this, we're going to become freelance. We already were going that way. With that said, the future that we see is hybrid, meaning it's never going to be all freelance or all full-time employment. Instead, it's a hybrid between the two. For us at Venturel, where we sit as a company, is 20% full-time, 80% freelance. And so we don't believe that it's going to become all freelancers. There's some great things about full-time employment, but that's sort of where we see it. And I will say, it will be more important for individuals, leaders, companies, you name it, to understand the fluid nature of this. So you might be a freelancer today, you might be a full-time employee tomorrow, but understanding how to work as a freelancer is going to be one of the critical skills. And we can go over what that means, but in the book, we highlighted a woman actually at a large tech company, and she was a freelancer prior, and she jumped into a full-time role. And because of her freelancing skills, she really, really, really got good at driving cross-functional initiatives because of that upfront scoping, the ability to understand how to work with various stakeholders and understand how to put all of the opinions together. But so yeah, the future is not all going to be freelance. It's going to be more fluid, and everyone will have to understand how to work like and with freelancers.
Yes, and talking about going for a hybrid model, in my scenario, in of course the Asian market, the one sector which is getting most affected by this COVID-19 is actually the learning sector, the distance learning sector. So is human cloud a feature that can be leveraged in the distance and online learning?
Yeah, that's an incredible question. So to reiterate, how is learning affected by COVID, and what will its implications be in regards to independent freelance work? A lot of internships are being withheld, and a lot of jobs are actually being postponed or just being dropped. And so from an education perspective, freelance has an incredible opportunity because, like I mentioned, it opens up access to other opportunities. For example, I was a finance and accounting major. I don't use any of my finance accounting, but freelance never asked, are you a finance and accountant? Freelance asked, can you get me a list of 15 competitors and get me sentiment analysis to understand the strengths and weaknesses in the market? And so that's the first thing it does. The second thing it'll do for education, and it is doing, is it's accelerating those feedback loops. So traditionally, you start an internship maybe on June 1st, you realize you hate the job 2 weeks in, yet they're stuck paying you and you're stuck going there for the next 3 months. So unless you're working at a big tech company that's just going to give you a bunch of Xboxes and put Pitbull on the stage and just have you have a good time, it's a pretty horrendous experience if you're locked in for the next, say, 2 or 3 months. So that's the second thing, is it'll accelerate the opportunities so you can learn faster. There's a great platform called Parker Dewey. If anyone's interested in the student-specific space, they are just a student freelance platform, and it's incredible. I can't say enough good things about what freelance can do for students.
Definitely. Actually, I will second you on that because I am a chemical engineer by training, but my first jobs in my college as a choreographer actually. As a choreographer and I was a math tutor. So yeah, trust me, freelancing can help loads. And I have had my first gigs through these of the corporate level assignments only. So
Yeah.
that I can second you on that.
We hired earlier this week. We hired an economics major, and he was interested in startups, venture capital, and the freelance economy. And so, yeah, he's going to be doing some sales work. But we told him, we said, listen, hit your numbers, and then tell us what you want to do. Like, give us just like a freelancer, give us the outcome you want to hit. We'll see if we can make it work. And so now he's learning a lot of stuff that was outside of his major, and if he adds value, then that's incredible.
Yeah, I have seen even philosophy majors being investment bankers after a couple of years of training. I've seen that stuff. So it's a good thing. People are getting very flexible options right now. So any sort of a management model that you see is perfect for the hybrid scenarios?
Yeah, the question I heard was, is there any revenue model that's perfect?
The management models actually, the management matrices. We actually have a lot of them.
Yes. So actually, something very interesting in regards to a freelance team versus a full-time team is there's little to no management. And so think about this, okay? And if we think about management, traditionally we think leader at the top, and then you think people in the middle, and then you think people below, and there's just this chain, right? There's the classic org chart. Freelance can operate like a bunch of autonomous nodes, meaning you want to get a website done, and so you have the expert designer, you have the expert developer, the expert writer, and none of these people did you have to onboard or ramp up or have one-on-ones or have a performance improvement plan or any of that stuff. Instead, you just gave the outcome, you gave the success criteria, and you're operating as this like autonomous hive. And so that's all the way. Like that is we could say extreme model. We do run teams like that. So while I call it extreme, it's also incredible. It's way faster. The autonomy for each member is huge, and so they just surprise the crap out of you, quite frankly. But there's also other models. So in the middle, a strong model is having more of a project manager along with kind of think of it as a coach. So instead of just this autonomous hive, you still have sort of leadership or vision at the top, and then you have more of clear project management where that project manager is creating the sprint boards, assigning each tasks, keeping up with progress, whatever is needed there. So that's sort of the middle model where, it still kind of looks like the org chart. But it's we can talk about how it's different there. But yeah, so I'd say you could use the same management models. You could be in the middle where it's more project management, or you could be totally autonomous. I'd say the biggest difference though is that you have to scope immediately up front. You have to define everything in terms of the communication patterns, how many revisions of feedback, like you have to be very explicit. So I hope that gives you a good overview of the management.
Yeah, and Matthew, once we talk about the freelancer basically have three ways to grow his business. So one is actually going through the platforms like Upwork or Fiverr or something. The second way is relying on hardcore word of mouth publicity. The third way is building his own brand online, maybe through Facebook, through a website or something like that. So how do you recommend a freelancer to have their own business? How to identify the weightage of these different factors in making a market for themselves?
Yeah, this is my favorite question because there's very little out there to do, and freelancers are doing everything. So I like the way you frame it of the three. The way that we frame it and the way that I've seen is it goes network, outcome. I have the slide. Sorry, network, outcome, and actual operations. So by network, that's sort of how are you sourcing your projects, and it can be a freelance platform. It doesn't have to be. And so a lot of the data that we have is saying that the two best sources of work is actually your existing clients, but other freelancers. And I'll be honest, I was so shocked to see this data. I sort of intuitively knew it as a freelancer, but I didn't believe it was real. And so that is sort of the first lever of how to get your work. Yes, you can 100% use the platforms. And it's not just Upwork. It also is Upwork or a Parker Dewey or a We Are Rosie or Paro or your niche skill set. So that's the first one. The second one is then, or second engine, is then how do you knock that outcome out of the park? And so the number one thing you need to do is you need to under promise and over deliver. And so there's numerous ways to sort of make sure that happens. And one is with the under promise over deliver. How are you managing expectations? So how are you making sure that your customer or your client knows exactly what you're going to do? And if they don't, that it teeters on the side of you being able to go over and above. And so there's numerous levers here. I brought up before the statement of work. That's literally just a defined document. That's what is going to happen, what is a comparable, when, and how much will it cost. So the first one we like to say is building the network, meaning how are you going to have sources of work coming in? The second one is building the outcomes, meaning how are you going to align expectations and underperform and over deliver? Related to that, we have noticed that there's a serious scale constraint. And what I mean by that is you have to go above and beyond just being an individual. And there's two ways that this really, really becomes either painful or impactful. The first way is you simply don't have the time. And so if you are a freelancer, you're doing 2 to 5 projects at a time. One of those projects lasts a day, one lasts a week, a month, a year. And so if you're doing everything yourself, you inevitably are going to get stuck in the roller coaster, the feast or famine, because when 3 of those projects end, you're now back to having nothing. So that's the first. That's the first one, is just to you can't do everything yourself. You don't have the time. The second one is that the projects, the high complexity, high dollar, and high length projects, they need teams, and they need beyond your one skill set. So in the 2 projects that I mentioned in terms of the giant product that I built and the large motorcycle manufacturer, in no way, shape, or form could you be an individual freelancer and get and win those projects. But what you could do is you could be the main lead for the client and say, we will take on this outcome and work with other freelancers who have the supplemental skills. So if you're going to say, yes, we can take on this website, you know that you have the bench of a designer, developer, writer, whatever it is that you can't do. So the first reason to really, really collaborate with, refer work to your other freelancers is you don't have the time. You're going to get stuck in a roller coaster if you do it all yourself. And the second reason is that you need to augment the work so that you can take on the high complexity projects. And one super tangible example last week, a big tech company comes in and tells one of our freelancers, we need 3 white papers in under 3 months, and you need to start working on Friday. If it was just that freelancer, no way, no shot they'd be able to take that on. So that's, first 2 engines is the network and the outcomes. The third network is the operations. And that's all of the standard operating procedures that you build into your business. For example, one might be when you have a new client, you always have a kickoff call, or you always have a Trello board that kicks up, or you always have a de facto method of communication. These things can be endless. This is where we sort of excel, is enabling freelancers to have consistent, and quite frankly, we take care of 80% of these. But so that's the third. So you start off with your network, and that can be a freelance platform. It can be other freelancers. It can be LinkedIn. You then wow with the actual projects, and then you build your operations.
Wow, that's actually a very descriptive answer for the question. And actually, I prefer that. And let's say from both point of view, our company is going for a freelancer, or freelancer is going for a company. So, what red flag should we look out for before picking up a project? Because sometimes freelancing doesn't really end up in a very good relationships. Are there any red flags we should look out for?
Yeah, so good question. So I'll give the red flags actually for a freelancer and a client, and they're kind of the same thing. Do they really want the job, and does the client put the effort in to actually hiring you versus just putting out a project when you know they're not going to hire for you, or they're just trying to find the lowest bid, or they have a track record? And this is where freelance, I will say, one of the most beautiful things about it is it's super transparent. And so if you're on most of the platforms, you can see these clients. And if these clients have done some shady stuff, like, see it. Likewise, there's some methods up front to weed out if a client is serious. And so one could be a brief. That's one thing that as a client I actually love, is when a freelancer comes to me and says, great job post, but you need to answer these 4 questions for me to even give you a ballpark. So from a client side, how to watch out for the red flags, see if they're actually putting any effort in, and maybe go the extra mile of having a questionnaire or having some sort of intake there. Now, from a freelancer side, it's similar, where the red flag is this person serious? And what I mean by that, the way that, so this is how I hire for everything. I take away the name, I take away the face, I don't even look at a resume. What I do is I base it off the questions that they're giving me, and then I look at their portfolio. So we do ask specific questions, and we line up all of the responses, and we just go line item by line item, looking at the different questions, and we shortlist. And then the ones that we like, we look at the portfolio to match. So that's sort of how we mitigate the red flags. One thing that we're very, very passionate about is removing, as much as we possibly can, like trying to remove the bias that we all have. And so for us, it's, what is the tangible example of how much you want the job? And it's a super red flag. Like, freelancers know it. Like, don't half-ass a job post. Like, don't half-ass proposal. And if you do, you're gonna get a bad client. But yeah, so that's how we weed it on both sides.
Yeah, because sometimes things really go wrong in terms of handling freelancer, handling the company as well. And one thing, the best thing of being a freelancer is, or someone hiring one, is you can hire across the globe right now. But sometimes there comes a cultural clash in how an American used to work, how a Japanese used to work, and how a German is working. So how to create that buffer zone and sort of understanding that, okay, now we're adapting to a culture right now, because some freelancing jobs can stretch for long, and their understanding of culture can really come in handy. So how do you propose to do that?
Yeah, that's incredible. That's actually probably one of my favorite questions I've heard yet, is the cultural context, and how do you work with that? I think it comes down to being intentional and explicit in everything you do. And it's also, it's not unique to remote. What is unique is that the problems get amplified. So what I mean by that is, instead of just starting a relationship and seeing what happens, be explicit about some of the things that could go off the rails. So for example, if there's ways that you like to receive feedback, be explicit about that. If there are numbers of feedback revisions that you will take, be explicit about that. If there are things, this is why I always have a statement of work and a master service agreement with me at all times, basically, whether it's a freelancer or someone we hire full time, or even someone that we're just partnering with or collaborating with. And so, I've operated in every type of environment, quite frankly, dealing in tech, dealing in finance, all parts of the globe. And I've kind of noticed we really all are the same, right? We all just want to be valued for doing good work, and we all just want to do good work. And the Dutch are especially harsh in terms of they like to give very direct and Dutch feedback. Americans, I will say, we can be a little passive aggressive. We're very good at that, and we're very ignorant. So we believe that we know everything in the world, and so there's numerous stereotypes that for me, like for like that could be true. But so long as you are being explicit and intentional and really documenting these things, and then it's just super basic, but just assume good intention. There's been many times where I'd want to go nuts on a freelancer, and I'm sure a freelancer would want to go nuts on me. But then in really looking at the documented procedures that we had, looking at the feedback that I gave, looking at the scope of the work before they started working, I realized I was totally in the wrong. So that's I always tell leaders, like, you're going to be wrong a lot, so much. And the difference in remote is that it's going to be documented, it's going to be transparent, and it's going to be amplified. So just be explicit, be intentional, and ideally get everything documented.
Exactly, and it makes me remind of an anecdote which happened. I was working with a freelancer with a visitor out of Afghanistan. We were on a video chat, and I gave him a thumbs up. And a thumbs up in Afghanistan actually means up yours. So it wasn't really well received. So I really make sure now whenever I hire a freelancer or I work with someone, I make sure that I'm very well in the very well versed with the basic terminology of the cultural context, because that's actually my personal question which I put it out there. So it does give a lot of confusion actually. I prefer avoiding that. So that's why I asked this question for the last.
That's my favorite one yet. You gave a thumbs up and it means, yeah, that is wow. Smooth. Smooth.
Yeah, and just a word out for all the listeners out there as well. Never do thumbs up when you're dealing with a client in Middle East or even sometimes in Brazil as well. Because in Brazil sometimes it actually means the same. So yeah, you have to be a little more conscious of the cultural context out there. So I guess that was pretty much the question which we had, and yeah, I guess we can wrap the session up after Matthew gave us such a beautiful insights. So a last call out to our audiences if they have any other questions which we can use.
Yeah, for sure. So reach out to me via LinkedIn. Reach out to me via Matthew@venturel.io. We'll send out the presentation to everyone. And yeah.
So I guess that was it. The session was actually amazing, Matthew. Thank you so much. Yeah, I personally learned a lot. And guys, whoever turned out here right now, we will all receive a copy of the webinar. And very soon you will have the entire video on YouTube as well, and some snippets on Instagram and LinkedIn profile of Designhill as well. So guys, stay tuned to Designhill, and you will receive a lot of such webinars. And Matthew, we might invite you again for the same, because I personally like this a lot, and I might invite again for the session. Will that be okay with you?
Sounds great. Sounds great to me. And feel free, everyone, to reach out. It's an awesome time. Let's take advantage of it.
Yeah, guys, please feel free to reach out to Matthew, because I have tried to reaching out to him a lot, and he's actually very friendly and responsive, so I can vouch for him here. So
I'll try my best. You got to give me 72 hours, though. I will give you a warning. I'm very asynchronous, so if I don't respond quickly, I apologize. I'll be very intentional when I respond. But yeah, give me a little bit of
time. So of course, guys, that's a wrap, and I guess you all had a great time, and Matthew, you too. And we will see you soon. So take care, guys, and Matthew, we will get back to you regarding the performance of the webinar as well. So guys, take care, and Matthew, we will see you. Have a good day ahead.
I don't know how to get out of here.
I'll take care of it.